Here we go again. Welcome on into another episode of BKL Makes Me Want to Shout. I'm Josh Reed alongside Carl Jones, Matt Parrino, and Ryan Talbot. The Bills coming off of a very, disgusting loss to the Miami Dolphins. In fact, Matt and I always fly back from games together, and we're sitting in seats next to each other. And typically, we'll talk a little bit about the game, whether it was a win or a loss, and both of us just kind of put our headphones on and we're like, just get us back to Buffalo at this point. It was there wasn't a whole lot to say about that one. I think we both needed to let it breathe and sit on it a little bit. But now that we've had a little time to sit on it, Matt, let's have that conversation now. Where do you stand with the Bills coming out of that?
I think the first thing that I'm sitting here with on Tuesday, a couple days removed, is my concern level for the offense, but more specifically about Joe Brady. And the fact that there feels like so many similarities to what was going on with the offense back when Ken Dorsey was relieved of his duties and Brady was promoted. And when we got a chance to talk to him yesterday and trying to kind of diagnose what went wrong offensively for this game, there were three things at play. Number one, he said that he wished that he had thrown the ball more early. Then in another stage of the interview, he said we needed to establish the run a little bit better than we did. And then the other part of it is like I asked him about this was one of the worst pass defenses in the league and almost felt like you should be able to go in there with no game plan and just play backyard football and find a way to win. And he kind of leaned into some excuses like the personnel changes and not being familiar with what they were going to do. Is it about them or is it about you? Which is something that you always talk about at these, post-mortem press conferences. And I think there's a lot of pressure on Joe Brady right now. And the Brian Daboll stuff aside, of course, a former successful offensive coordinator becomes available just as the offense is struggling. It's a juicy storyline. But if things don't get better quickly, Sean McDermott put all of his faith in Joe Brady. He gave him the stamp of confidence, all those things that he did for Ken Dorsey a little bit before he ended up moving on from him. I think that the microscope is on Joe Brady in this passing game this week against the Bucs.
Ryan, doesn't sound like Joe could quite pin down the issue, or at least there was a moving target a little bit during his press conference. Where would you pin it down?
Yeah, I would pin it down with the fact that he couldn't adjust in game. And that's, the sign of a coordinator that might be a little bit in over his head. You have to be able to adjust and roll with the punches in these games. And at times it looked like Miami was selling out for the run. They were sitting on these underneath routes. They were almost daring the Bills to challenge them vertically, which they just could not do on a consistent basis. So, Brady comes in and, as Matt said, contradicts himself a few times. We should be throwing it more. We should be establishing the run. And then there's always those baffling play calls, the end around again to Elijah Moore that doesn't work for the third straight time. Miami calling a timeout before the 4th and 1 where it looked pretty evident that they were going to throw the ball on that play and then not adjusting and coming up with something different. Miami was well prepared for that. So this is going to be a huge moment, as Matt pointed out, against the Buccaneers this Sunday. Are you going to have Joshua Palmer back? Maybe that helps with the vertical passing game. But with the ebbs and flows of this season, the Bills are in a little bit of trouble right now, especially within their own division.
Carl, this sets up a point that I really want to make because I think the offense's biggest issue is they have no identity. And part of that is because you have your best player on your team and one of the best players in the NFL, the MVP, is the quarterback Josh Allen. The problem with that is they can't throw the ball. They just can't. That used to be their fastball. They called it their fastball. The strength of this year's team in 2025 is James Cook and the offensive line and running the ball. But in order to do that, you kind of got to take the ball out of the hands of one of the best players in the NFL. And that can be a tough thing to wrap your head around. But, Carl, I think they've got to do it. I think if they want to save this season, they've got to go back to going, hey, this is our identity. We're going to run the ball because, quite frankly, we don't have the receivers that can make plays in the pass game. And Josh is getting beat up. He's getting hit. The pressures are getting to him. He looks like a defeated man on the sideline. They need to turn around, and if that means giving the ball to James Cook 30 times next week, they need to do it.
I'm right with you in terms of just playing bigger personnel, 12, 13, 21, 22, just get all the big bodies out there because that's their best personnel. The personnel groupings when there's a mixture of Jackson Hawes, Dawson Knox, Kincaid when he's healthy, Reggie Gilliam. Those guys are able to dictate the game on their terms in both the run and pass game. But it is interesting, though, that they've kind of pivoted towards this identity of playing bigger and getting and be more physical downhill in the run game when they got rid of Ken Dorsey and introduced Joe Brady as offensive coordinator. There was a distinct shift between Stephon Diggs' production pre-Brady and post-Brady. There was a distinct difference in Gabe Davis' production in pre-Brady and post-Brady. And then I don't think Mac Hollins is the best receiver either, but he's having a better year this year in New England than he did at any point in Buffalo. He went for 100 yards last week. Mac Hollins is like their fourth best receiver. So like I'm not trying to say that Joe Brady isn't a great offensive coordinator or that he doesn't bring good things to the table. His run game is clearly good, and his ability to utilize those tight end personnels are also awesome. But the passing game has been a little stale, bleh, for the lack of a better term, which is weird to say because you have a freak of nature at quarterback. So I'm right with you. I think this is maybe more of an offseason discussion on how you try to get back to more of a Josh Allen-centric offense. But for the moment, these are the pieces that they have, and they just got to roll with them.
Matt, one of the things we heard in the locker room from, I think it was Dion. It may have been Spencer Brown. You can correct me, but I think it was Dion. And he said, hey, I mean, who doesn't like to run the ball? I mean, I know a lot of Bills fans out there are like, well, when you have 17, I don't need to see him run the ball all the time. But you know, offensive linemen, they're going to get behind that rallying cry. Carl brings up the personnel side of this. So is there a disconnect anywhere? Do you think there's a disconnect anywhere between the personnel that Brandon Beane and his staff have provided Sean McDermott and his staff and what they want to do?
It feels like that with some circumstances on this team with how the roster has fallen in 2025. And I think the easiest place to start with that, and we're going to talk about him more in a minute, is Keon Coleman, right? Everybody through the draft process that if you wanted to listen to who he was going to be at the next level, talked about the need to make him a slot-only player. And it's felt like the Bills at every stage of this thing have fought against that. Like Brandon Beane came out and said he was an ex-receiver. Joe Brady is not moving him around a ton, a little bit in the game last week, but again, not any really true slot reps. And I think that that's something that gets you into trouble when there's a disconnect between the vision for a player. I think back to early on in this regime when they drafted Cody Ford, who had that positional mystery in terms of what the Bills were going to do with him. You know, he gets in here and they start him at tackle, but it was kind of a blah decision. He was splitting time with like the ancient Ty and Secchi, and then before long, they ended up converting him inside to guard. You have to have a plan that is aligned on the front office side and the coaching side for how you're going to use these players. And, you know, luckily for them, there's a couple of pieces that are really starting to look like they've hit. You know, Cole Bishop has played 2 really good games. Max Harrison with an interception in both of his first 2 NFL games. You're excited about that. But in some of these other situations offensively, some of the personnel decisions, what they've given the Bills offensive coordinator to use, it just hasn't felt like there's been great alignment.
Ryan, what are your thoughts on that?
I think there's a mutual frustration, maybe not a disconnect, but a frustration there because, you know, I'll go back to Curtis Samuel. That seemed like that was Joe Brady's guy, and that was going to be a move for this offense that was going to help. And through injuries, obviously that's factored a big part of this. He has just not been an effective receiver. They go out this season, they pay $13 million for Joshua Palmer. Palmer showed some flashes in the Atlanta game, but there has not been much there. So I feel like they are in lockstep in terms of who they want, a vision for this offense. But now that it's not working and you throw the injuries into the mix as well, I think both of them, Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane, wanted to make a move at the deadline. And the fact that that didn't happen has left them both kind of wondering, what do we do now? You know, you heard Sean McDermott post-game. Is this roster good enough to win it all? I love these guys. That doesn't answer the question. You can love these guys. You can love this roster, but you didn't answer the question. Is there enough faith that you have enough talent here? between the injuries and the ineffectiveness of the players on offense that you've brought in, paid a good amount of money for, to boot at wide receiver, it's a little worrisome.
Now, were these concerns, just to play a little tug of war here, were these concerns that everyone had coming out of the Chiefs game? Or is this just kind of now, right? I mean, because we can all be very reactionist, all of us. But I didn't feel like there was any talk of a disconnect maybe between McDermott and Bean coming out of the Chiefs game, coming out of the Ravens game early in the season, coming out of the first, where they win the first 3 straight to start the year, 4 straight to start the year. So I don't want to get too, myself personally, I don't want to get too reactionary. I'm with you 100%. To me, the big issue right now is, where's the answer, Carl? Where is the answer? Because defensively, for some of the issues they have there, they may have some answers still coming back. You know, Shaq Thompson probably going to come back. Christian Benford, more than likely coming back, right? Ed Oliver, maybe even a chance that he comes back. So I think you have some answers coming back on that side of the ball. Offensively, though, you are what you are right now.
Yeah, and that's what's intriguing to me, because I'm not going to sit up here and pound the table and say that Curtis Samuel and Elijah Moore, or even Josh Palmer when he returns to the lineup, are world-beating players. None of those guys are going to make a Pro Bowl. But I just find it fascinating that those guys had productive years before they got to Orchard Park, and then as soon as they get to Orchard Park, it is just their fault that they're not playing well. Once again, I want to make this abundantly clear. I'm not saying that these guys are awesome players, but you have to figure out a way to make do with what they are as players. I watched Elijah Moore for 2 years in Cleveland. I never thought he was great, but he was useful. I saw Curtis Samuel for a long time in Washington and Carolina. I didn't think he was Jamar Chase, but I thought he had a skill set that the Bills can use. The Chargers let Josh Palmer walk, so that's a little different. But I thought that he had a skill set as a separator that the Bills can use. They have to figure out a way to make that portion work. And quite frankly, this team had Matt Collins. They had Stephon Diggs. They had Gabe Davis. And those guys weren't their best selves under this version of the offense. You got to find out a way. I don't care who you call. I don't care what Madden plays you figure out this weekend and go play and figure it out. You got to figure out to make those guys work, because Jalen Waddle can't come on the roster at this point in the year. It's over with.
Yeah, Matt, you mentioned Keon Coleman a little bit there. You know, when it comes to guys making plays on the outside, they're very limited. And then we see Dalton Kincaid gets hurt. And immediately when he goes down, I think everyone in the press box sitting there in South Florida looked at each other and went, Matt's sitting right here. And I think we all kind of were like, well, what are they going to do now? I mean, what's the solution at this point? Okay, maybe Keon Coleman. Matt, the answer that we got from Josh Allen after the game when asked about Keon Coleman, the delivery of it was very interesting, because there was a long hesitation and then well, he got one today. When he was asked kind of about, is he being consistent enough? What did you take from that?
Yeah, I think that started the avalanche that's kind of fallen on Keon Coleman over the last 24, 36 hours. And the other piece of it is, too, like, Bills fans take over in Miami, right? Like, especially this season with a 2-7 Dolphins team. There was a lot of Bills fans in that stadium watching every route that he ran, and one of the big collective assessments was there wasn't enough effort being given. Some lazy route running. I had Chris Trapasso on the show yesterday, and he put out a clip on his TikTok account just where he spliced up a bunch of routes that Keon Coleman ran in the game. And there just is no suddenness, deliberateness to the way that he operates. And it's so foreign, being someone that's covered this team as long as I have, watching Stephon Diggs day in and day out with how he practices, how he goes out and operates. And I'm not saying he's got to be Stephon Diggs, but there is an effort level on every single route run that it's unmistakable when it's there. And when it's not there, I think it's a bit of a problem. And we've given a lot of heat to Keon, a lot of heat to Joe Brady. Maybe a name that needs to start being brought up is Adam Henry, the wide receivers coach for the Buffalo Bills. How is the developmental plan? How is he getting these guys ready to play in a week in and week out? What's been his role in developing Keon Coleman? Because I don't know about you guys, we haven't heard a lot about Adam Henry over the last couple of years. The guy before him, Chad Hall, players went out of their way to talk about what they meant to him. I mean, I remember Gabe Davis for weeks after Chad Hall left was like inconsolable. And I'm not saying that you have to have this unbelievable connection, but there's other people that have to start wearing a little bit of the responsibility for why some of these guys aren't having the impact that the Bills offense needs them to have.
Carl, is somebody who played at a high level. Effort is one of those things you cannot have questioned as a player. Like that can never be part of the equation. That should never, ever, ever come up. Look, you never, as a receiver, you never want to have drop passes, stuff like that, a missed blocking assignment thing. But effort, that's a big no-no.
It's a non-negotiable. I can't control how high I can jump, how fast I can run, how hard I can hit someone. But I can control my effort on and off the football field. And I think that conversation about his effort and his urgency goes beyond what happens on Sundays, because I think if you practice a certain way, if you approach your routine in a certain way off the field, that translates to Sundays as well. And I thought it was very telling, Sean McDermott's answer to you, Parrino, yesterday when he didn't just talk, he was very vague in how he responded about Keon's effort. But I thought he was vague because I don't think he's just talking about the games. I think he's talking about his entire get up, his entire routine about being a professional football player. So I'm right with you. You got to be urgent. You have to have effort, because I promise you at the collegiate level, the gap gets smaller with talent. You're not that much better than guys. At the National Football League level, the gap is minuscule. There is no gap. Everyone's good. It's the effort and the urgency that you have that makes you a better player.
Ryan, I mean, where are we with Keon Coleman at this point? I mean, look, we're deep into season number 2 now for this guy, and he'll show a flash every once in a while. He can go up, he can body guys and make a good catch, but it's just so few and far between.
Yeah, and it comes down to consistency and, again, effort. If you're not showing the effort in practice or the effort in games, Allen's not going to want to go to him often with the ball. There's a reason he's had 2 issues with disciplinary actions by this team in his 2 years with the Bills. It's clearly some kind of issue with him transitioning to being a pro and acting like a pro. And at this point, someone does need to sit down with him and talk to him. And I'm sure Sean McDermott and some of the coaches have already. But if it doesn't resonate soon, it could be a very short tenure for Coleman here in Buffalo. The clip going around was 4th and 16. The game was kind of out of hand, but he was running at half speed. It was not, you could certainly question his effort on that route, because there was no way he was going by the cornerback the way he was running there.
I think one of the issues, and you bring up the receivers coach, he's somebody that's got to be holding him accountable. But who else in that room, Matt? They just don't have that guy in that room anymore. They don't have Diggs or Mac Hollins that you feel like is a veteran who's going to hold those guys accountable. Because, look, your coach can say one thing, but when you start hearing it from your peers and your teammates, the guys you're going to battle with on the field on Sundays, when those guys start locking in on you, does he have that? Does he have that guy right now in his corner who's going to get after him?
Not only do I don't think he has it in his room, I don't think he has it on his offense. Like 1 through 30 in that offensive room, like who's laying into Keon Coleman? Is Josh Allen? Like, I don't think so. And I sometimes think about the divorce of Diggs and the Bills and what really led into that. Nobody wants to talk about it. There'll be documentaries, there'll be podcasts on the other side of retirements that will tell all. But the thing for me the theory that makes the most sense is that Stephon Diggs brings an expectation of excellence and energy and intensity that I think wears on people that don't share it. And I think Tom Brady had it. I think Peyton Manning had it. I think Michael Jordan had it. Like, go watch The Last Dance. It is intense to be around these people that all they think about all the time is winning. Kobe Bryant. There's been some documentaries about him as well. I don't feel like anybody in that room, right? You know what? One guy might be like that is like Spencer Brown. But, like, I don't know if he's going to get up into Keon Coleman for not running a route. Like, that's kind of got to fall on Josh Allen. And I just don't know if that's necessarily his lane. And I don't know if the Bills have moved out of that business to make things a little bit easier on those that are in that building that don't share that kind of mentality. And again, I'm taking a massive leap here, right? Like, I'm not in there. I haven't talked to anybody about this. It's just an outside observation. But it feels like right now the nastiness that Sean McDermott talked about the last couple of weeks, for that to evaporate against the Miami Dolphins team that had 2 wins, just makes you question whether or not the kind of competitiveness exists in that locker room that they're going to need to go on the kind of run they want to go on over the next 2 months.
You know, that was one of the few things we actually did talk about on the flight. We talked about the Brady and Manning, and I even brought up, hey, you know, years ago, I don't know if you guys will remember this or not, but years ago, one of the things Josh Allen talked about was how he would read the Mamba mentality and Kobe Bryant and just like this, you know, I will rip my heart out, you know, before I'll lose this type of game. I think we've seen flashes of that of Josh, and I don't question his want, you know, to win and everything. But when you see those type of leaders, like Kobe didn't care if everybody on the roster hated him. He didn't. He didn't. Michael Jordan didn't care either. Most of these guys would fight their own teammates. The problem is, and I feel like Pat Mahomes has got a little bit of that in him too. Mm-hmm. The problem is you can't force a guy to be like that if it's not in his nature. And I don't know that it's in Josh Allen's nature. And that's fine. Everyone's built different. He doesn't take anything away from his talent and his ability to be one of the best players in the entire league. Carl, you can't force a square peg into a round hole when it comes to that. But it sure would be nice, to Matt's point, if you had a Stephon Diggs in there who's not afraid to get up in somebody's face.
I'm right with you, and I'm happy you made the point about, listen, it's nothing inherently wrong about being a player who's not maniacal about stuff like that. I mean, LeBron James is my GOAT. Sorry for anyone who's listening.
And he's not that way.
And he's not
he wants to be buddies with everybody.
Man, he's trying to be kumbaya with everybody on the roster, everybody in the building. So it's worked for him. But I do want to get back to the man in the arena type of ideology. I'm right with you guys. You do need guys to hold a certain level of excellence and standard in anything that you do. But at the end of the day, the man in the arena is the one that matters the most. It's the one that has to look into the mirror every single morning and says, this is the standard I hold myself to. Because if you don't have a certain level of respect and honor for what you do, it doesn't matter what other people think of you or want to think of you. So I hear you guys. I think the receiver coach holds some criticism for this. The OC, head coach, GM, quarterback, the list goes on and on and on. But at the end of the day, the foot stops with Keon Coleman, and he has to want to improve that effort in that part of his game.
Yeah, you're 100% right. Because at the end of the day, when we're questioning a dude's effort, like, come on, man. Yeah, I mean, you got to be better. You got to be better for your teammates. The division race, is it over, Matt? I mean, hey, one of us sat here about a month ago and said I'd be careful with these Patriots. And in particular, not because I thought they were good, but on top of that, you just look at their schedule, and it's now popping up every week. In fact, Matt and I looked at it after the game on the ride back to the hotel, and we're looking down through the schedule, and Matt's like, well, that's a win for him. That's a win for him. That's a win for him. I mean, this division, man, it sure looks like it's the Patriots to lose.
Ryan, why don't you kick this one off?
Yeah, no, I do think it looks like it's theirs to lose. The schedule is soft, and they're coming together at the right time. You see the development of Drake May. You see how much of a difference maker Stephon Diggs is. Maybe it was injuries that played a part in it, but now they're finally figuring out, hey, we have a really good rookie running back here, too, in this room. Mac Hollins stepping up. They have 4 or 5 just, deep at wide receiver. They look good there. They're disciplined on defense. There's a load of talent there. And then, oh, by the way, they have a fantastic head coach. So you put that all together, and it puts them in a really good spot, especially with the standings right now between them and Buffalo. This is their division to lose.
Matt, one of the things you brought up immediately when we started talking about this conversation on Sunday after the game was you were like, that game in Foxborough is going to be on fire.
Well, the Bills have one of the easiest schedules played through 10 weeks, but you know who's got an easier one? The New England Patriots. And November and December football is different. And when you exceed expectations and then all of a sudden the world elevates that level of expectation, you learn a lot about a team. I think back a couple of years ago when the Miami Dolphins were just kind of coming into their early Tyreek Hill, Mike McDaniel powers, and they were, I think at this stage of the season, in first place in the AFC East, and everybody wrote off the Bills. And when the national talk shows are starting to talk about you every single day, and you're not sneaking up on teams anymore. Like, you learn more about a team. And I like their coach. I think they got a great young quarterback. But even against some of these bad teams, like, you're going to get the best shot every week, because now you're in the conversation in terms of like Super Bowl contenders. And it just changes the math a little bit. So we'll know more about this team in a month. I'm not all the way there yet. I'm still, I said definitively coming into this season, this is the number 2 team in the AFC East, at least, right? I didn't think they were better than the Bills. Still don't think they're better than the Bills. But they've played better than the Bills. They currently sit ahead of them with a ton of wiggle room to work with over the next couple of weeks. But let's check back in middle of December, see where we're at.
Carl, wing sauce level. Are they mild, medium, or hot right now, the Patriots?
They're right in between medium and hot. I think this is the Commanders team from last year. I'm not saying they're going to go to the AFC Championship game like the Commanders did, but when you got an elite quarterback, a head coach that got his head on straight, that's the type of fire that can happen right there.
Yeah, I'm going to just wrap this up. Bill Cowher mentioned it a couple of weeks ago, Matt, when we had a chance to talk to him, and he said, look, the game changes in December. When the money's on the line, he was like, and the dust settles, it's great right now. The Patriots are a great story. The Colts are a great story. And he was like, when the dust settles, keep an eye on Josh Allen and the Bills, Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, the same teams we always see. More than likely, Lamar Jackson, the Ravens, they're right on the heels of the Steelers all of a sudden. And oh, by the way, Joe Burrow is back in the building. Now, it may be a while until he's back on the field for a game, but that Bengals team, I know they can't stop anybody, but if Burrow gets back out there, teams might not be able to stop them. All right, that does it. Thanks for watching and listening to another episode of BKL. Makes me want to shout.